Good morning. This is the sermon for September 19th. It's based on Mark chapter 9, verses 30 through 37. They went on from there and passed through Galilee. He did not want anyone to know it, for he was teaching his disciples, saying to them, "The Son of Man is to be betrayed into human hands, and they will kill him. And 3 days after being killed, he will rise again." But they did not understand what he was saying, and they were afraid to ask him. And then they came to Capernaum. And when he was in the house, he asked them, "What were you arguing about on the way?" But they were silent, for on the way they had argued with one another about who was the greatest. He sat down, called the 12, and said to them, "Whoever wants to be first must be last of all and servant of all." And then he took a little child and put it among them, and taking it in his arms, he said to them, "Whoever welcomes one such child in my name welcomes me, and whoever welcomes me welcomes not me, but the one who sent me." The Gospel of the Lord. Please join me in prayer. May the words of my mouth and the meditations of all our hearts be acceptable in your sight, O Lord, our rock and our Redeemer. Amen. Today's passage starts with Jesus for a second time telling his disciples that he is going to die, that he is going to be killed, that he is going to be betrayed or handed over into the hands of humans. And when Jesus is not teaching his disciples this, his disciples are having an argument about who's number one. It's like college football fans arguing who should be ranked first right now. Should it be Ohio? Should it be Oregon? Or should it be Alabama? Or should it be Oklahoma or Georgia or Iowa or whoever? It's like having that sort of argument. And Jesus seems frustrated with his disciples because when this happens, he sits down, which is assuming the role of a teacher. And then he takes a child, says that they're in the house of Capernaum. We don't, presumably this might be Peter's house. Certainly this is a house they go to a lot, and Peter has a house in Capernaum and has a mother-in-law who had been sick, so that seems like the common thing. He takes a child and says, we need to welcome as we welcome this child. Now, on the one hand, we like to think that we're welcoming towards children. We like to think that we are accommodating towards children. However, as a parent, being accommodating towards children can be really hard. It means having a schedule that can be flexible, because sometimes the child's going to be done with things. It can mean, if you're going to have children, particularly young children, staying overnight, you might have to, you might be expected to put covers over your electrical outlets. Might mean having a nice place for the child to be changed if they're at diaper age. Welcoming children could be more than just saying, "Hey, you can come on in." Sometimes children, along with other vulnerable members of society, require special accommodation. We might run into the same sort of thing if we were welcoming a sick person, or if we were welcoming a frail person or someone who had broken a bone. There's that aspect of it. But really the aspect that Jesus is getting of is that in his society, status and honor were celebrated in a different way than us. In his society, the oldest people had the seats of honor and privilege at the table. In his society, the oldest people were the ones who spoke and others listened. And that's because grandparents and elders were treasured and valued. You can step back from that and say, okay, if that's how it was, well, then children were considered not to have learned anything. And sometimes we use those phrases ourselves. They didn't know any better. Or later on, when Jesus is going to encounter the young rich man who says that he has kept all the commandments since his youth, the implication is, well, when I was young, I didn't know any better, but now I do. In Jesus' time, children were the lowest rung of status in society. You would not put a child at a central place in the table. You just wouldn't do it. You wouldn't make the child your focus. Children were expected to be not seen and not heard. The fact that Jesus takes this child isn't so much, trying to focus on the specifics of children. Jesus is taking the lowest rung of his society. He's taking someone at the edge, and he's putting them in the middle. And he's saying, we need to take these little ones, and these need to be who we welcome the most. For us, and for a society that caters quite a bit to children, though there are also ways that we completely ignore children. Jesus is saying, look at the people who are on the outside rung of society. Welcome them like you would welcome me. Welcome the people who are the lost, the least, and the lonely. Over the course of the Gospel of Mark, Jesus has cured a leper who is unclean. He has healed a woman who was hemorrhaging, who had a menstrual bleed that had lasted years that made her unclean. He has healed a Roman soldier's servant. He has healed Gentiles. He has healed the demon-possessed. He has healed the daughter of the Syrophoenician woman. Not just a Gentile, but a woman. And he is putting this child front and center. In other words, Jesus is going to a lot of the groups in his society who would have been dispossessed, who would have been considered the lost and the least and the lonely. And he's saying to his disciples who were arguing about who's number one, about which one of them is going to have the biggest statue. And he's saying to his disciples, we need to focus. You need to focus. The church needs to focus on the people on the outside. He is telling his disciples that they need to look at the lowest rung of society. For us, I would say the reminder of this is that the church is an institution that exists not for the benefit of the people within, but to feed, nurture, and equip those people and send them out. We are fed the meal of salvation, and that meal of salvation is to give us nourishment so that we can share God's love as we have experienced it in worship, in study, and in fellowship and Christian community together. Whoever welcomes this little child welcomes not me, but the one who sent me. We need to reach out to the people in our community who are at the lowest status. We need to reach out to the people in our context who are the low rung on the totem pole. We need to reach out because Jesus told us to, and because each of us in our own way has been the low rung at some point or another, and have been welcomed into the merciful, redeeming, nurturing arms of Christ. Amen.